Hello, I'm Ariam, and these are all the books I read in the month of August of 2025. So, before we get started, some stats. I read 17 books, I believe. Yes, 17 books. And I'm going to divide by genres, but because I read so much fantasy and I read so much historical fantasy, I put fantasy and historical fantasy as two different genres. So, for fantasy, I read 10 books. For historical fantasy, I read another 3 books. Then for realistic fiction, I read 2 books, and for biography, I read 1 book. Heavy on the fantasy. As for age ranges, I read 2 picture books, 2 early chapter books, not 13, 8 middle grade books, 2 adult books, 1 new adult book, and 1 YA book. So, let's get into, oh yes, DNFs. I should do DNFs. What did I DNF? Let's check. I DNF'd 3 books. The first book I DNF'd was Woke Anti-Semitism, How Progressive Ideology Harms Jews by David L. Bernstein. I just felt that this book was not well written. It kept on going over its points without actually making a conclusion. Then I DNF'd 6 Suspects by, what's his face? Vikram somebody. 6 Suspects by Vika Swaroop. It was just unbelievable. Like, it had too much suspension of disbelief for me. And for the same reason, I then DNF'd a book that I do not believe is ever translated into English, Chasamba, or Chovolat Sod Muchlat Bechlet, by Yigal Mosinzon, which is very surprising because he wrote one of my favorite musicals. But I guess when he wrote for kids, he wrote differently. And it was, again, too impossible to believe. Then we have all the books I did read, many of which I enjoyed. So, I read a Katie Kazoo book, Red, White, and a Chew by Nancy Krulik. So this series, basically we follow this girl who makes a wish one day that she has a terrible day and she wishes it to be anyone but herself. And in every book, a magic wind comes and turns her into someone else. And in this one, she gets turned into someone acting as the president that she has to do a report on for President's Day. I thought it was nice, but it took a while to get to the switch. Usually the wind happens quite early on in the story, and we had a bit of a beep-pop going on that was kind of annoying. Then I read a comic book, The Promise Part 1 by Jean Luen Yang. So this follows the Avatar The Last Airbender show, so I'm just not going to say anything about it because it would be spoilers for Avatar The Last Airbender. But what did I think about it? I did not actually like it. I contemplated DNFing the series, but I did continue. I read later on in the month The Promise Part 2 and The Promise Part 3, which it's a trilogy, and I enjoyed them a lot better. I thought I did a whole reading blog about this. Okay. Then I read Shopaholic to the Rescue, which is a book in the middle of the series of the Shopaholic series by Sophie Kinsella. So this book is spoilers again, but basically the first book we follow Becky Bloomwood, who is just way too in debt, and it's realistic fiction book, but I just love the way that Sophie Kinsella writes characters. I also have a whole vlog coming out about the Shopaholic series. Then I read Schoolbell in the Valley by Natalie Savage. Look, I can even hold it up. Natalie Savage Carlson? Yes, Natalie Savage Carlson. This is a reread for me, and I really enjoyed it. Very nice book it's about this girl who is illiterate, and she moves to live with her aunt and uncle who are also illiterate, and goes to school for the first time in her life. And it's just about finding out the correct path for you, and also just not looking down on other people, and adults can make mistakes too in this book, so I really like that. It's not a major theme that adults can make mistakes, but they can definitely make mistakes, and I like that. Then I read The Angel of the Crows by Catherine Addison, which is a Sherlock Holmes retelling in which there are angels. Every angel has a place that they belong to, and Sherlock Holmes is an angel. And it sounds kind of crazy, but it's really, really good. I loved it so much. I did think that the characterization of Sherlock Holmes was a bit over the top at times, and there were some parts was one specific retelling of a story. So this has retellings of different stories, and there was one that I didn't enjoy, but besides that, I love them all, and I thought it was great. Highly recommend. Then one I did not recommend is Buzzing with Questions, The Inquisitive Mind of Charles Henry Turner by Janison Harrington. This is a picture book biography, and it's about Charles Henry Turner, who was a scientist, and I cannot pin down which kind of scientist because he was a lot of them. And he was a black scientist at the turn of the century, and, this book should be great. It really should, but she tries to do too much. She also doesn't know who she's writing for. Is she writing a picture book biography for 4th graders, or is it for kindergarteners? And it's all over the place. Then I read Shazam number 6 by Jeff Johns and Marco Santucci. So this is the 2019 one. So again, another comic. And if you don't know, Shazam, the superhero, is a kid who can turn into an adult superhero. And he and his foster siblings, he gives all of his foster siblings also superpowers. And obviously I'm not going to tell you what happens in number 6, but in the first one, he and his siblings discover these magical worlds and go to explore them, and things get started from there. And there are also things happening in the real world. There's a lot of things happening, but overall, despite the comics being short, I actually think that, especially in this comic, it's really well handled where the stuff, how much stuff is happening. And this comic just gave me, this specific one, Shazam number 6, it gave me all the emotions too. Okay, then I read Night Owl by Christopher Denise, which is a picture book about a little owl who wants to become a knight. I thought it was cute, but I read it because I read the second book in this duology, and I loved it, and it just did not live up to that. However, illustrations, amazing, and in the second book, even more amazing. Definitely read Early Bird and Night Owl and Early Bird. Night Owl itself, you can give or take. Then I read Christmas Shopaholic by Sophie Kinsella, which is the last book so far in this Shopaholic series, and I think look, Sophie Kinsella might write another book. Shopaholic to the Rescue and Christmas Shopaholic were written way after the original books came out. However, Christmas Shopaholic really does a good job in wrapping up some threads that weren't wrapped up, so I think it's perfect to end it there. I mean, if she writes another book, I'll read it, but Then I read Charlie Hernandez in the League of Shadows by Ryan Calijo. This is a middle grade fantasy based on Spanish is in the language, not Spanish is in the country, myths, and basically this kid, his parents disappear, and he finds the secret map and goes to where it is, and he discovers that mythological creatures are real. I thought this book had a lot of potential, but unfortunately it really failed. The main place it failed for me was that it was there were two main places it failed for me. One, it was too grown up. It's supposedly aimed at 12-year-olds, but the language and the stuff happening in it was too grown up. And by stuff happening, I don't mean that it was gory or anything. I mean just that the way the kids acted, you could very much tell that he wanted to write for a slightly older audience. At least I thought. That's how it seemed. Then the other thing that was a major failing for me is there was this one point where our main character, Charlie Hernandez, asks a mythological creature, when he very first time he meets them, how can this be true? How could there be mythological creatures? And I thought it was all just stories, and the mythological creature answers, and these are the exact words. Okay, they're not the exact words, but this is what he answers. The stories are all over the world, so how can they not be true? Colin, and we're just ignoring colonialism there. There's not a word for it in English. How do you say solemn in English? It would be the literal translation would be shrieked. Yeah, it shrieked to me. It shrieked to me. I'm going to translate it literally. Okay, so I'm not going to continue with the series. Then I reread The Cricket in Times Square by George Selden. This is not my favorite book ever. Schoolbell, it's not even a level of Schoolbell and Valley, where it's I'm thinking about it a lot. I love it. But rereading it, I really enjoyed it. There were places where it was it's okay, because animals talking is not my favorite trope and never has been. But there were some parts that were they were really nice. I really enjoyed the ending, especially the whole ending part. I really enjoyed it. The beginning and the middle were, it's okay, but the ending I really liked. Then I read Turning Darkness into Light by Marie Brennan, which is a sequel series to her Memoirs of Lady Trent series. And it is impossible to explain what this is about without spoiling the Memoirs of Lady Trent series. But listen, they are great books. And the Memoirs of Lady Trent, you need to listen to audiobooks. This one, it's multimedia, and the narrator isn't as good, so I recommend for this one, reading it with your eyes. But let's just get to what the Memoirs of Lady Trent series is about. So it's a historical alternate world book series where the world has dragons, and our main character, Lady Trent, of course, she really wants to become a dragon naturalist, but this is the early 1800s, so women aren't supposed to be scientists. But she does end up becoming a dragon naturalist, and each book follows her going to a different place in the world and studying the dragons there, and I love them, and they're great, and they're amazing. Okay. Then I read Arashan, The End of Time by Roshni Chokshi. This is a reread for me also. And yeah, I love it. So what is the series about? This is a middle grade series based on the Mahabharata, which is an ancient Indian book written in Sanskrit. And the Mahabharata itself follows 5 brothers. And basically, the gist of this book is that Aru lights a lamp that is cursed and she really shouldn't light, and she discovers that she is one of the reincarnations of these 5 brothers. And then she has to stop the evil being she released from the lamp with her other reincarnations, and it's great, and I love these books. They're one of my favorite middle grade series ever, and I didn't even read this. I read when I was a kid because it didn't come out until I was adult. That's how good they are. Okay, then I read The City Beautiful by Aidan Polydoros, which I recommended twice today on a Discord because I loved it so much. However, it does have some flaws. So what is this about? This happens in 1893 in Chicago. It's a historical fantasy. We're following our main character, Alter, who his best friend is murdered, and then he's possessed by his best friend's Dybbuk. And he has to find who murdered his best friend in order to release the Dybbuk. Now, it's amazing. It is as amazing as it sounds. There were 2 flaws with it, however, and they're both around Alter being gay. So the first one is just that the romance did not make sense. Like, there was too much going on with the romance, and in general, there was a lot going on in the book, so that the romance didn't make sense. Like, adding all of the stuff going on with the romance to all of the stuff going on in the book, it just didn't work. And this is a common complaint, too. I would give a disclaimer, I don't like romance anyways, but I was looking at the reviews, and this is an extremely common complaint that people had. The other one is so this guy he falls in love with, Frankie, he used to be a Shiva student, and he sees that Alter is like, right, the sentence in the 3rd book of the Torah, I forget what it's called in English, that no male lying, wow, that was a terrible translation, no male sex, I guess. Okay, now we have that word in my video, so let's see if YouTube bans this video or decides it's only for adults. Anyways, and then he gives a, reason why it doesn't mean what Alter thinks it means, right? And the reason he gives makes no sense to me. Like, I would love to learn more about the reason he gives, if it's real at all, because I don't think the author would have made it up, but where would he have taken it from? Because it just does not make sense looking at the actual line. And there isn't even really that much context around it. Of course there's context around it, because in the Torah there's always context around it. I'm not saying don't be gay, okay? But I'm saying the commentary Frankie gave on that verse makes no sense. And it really bothered me. It bothers me a lot. Otherwise, I love this book. Everything in here was really great. I learned also a lot about Chicago's Jewish community. Of course, I knew there were Jews in Chicago for a long time, but I really didn't know much about their history. And it was super interesting reading it. And this takes place during the World Fair, so that was also interesting. It was just interesting reading about the historical stuff. There is fantasy. Just a warning, if you're looking for historical fantasy, this is very much on the side of historical. The Memoirs of Lady Trent series is on the side of fantasy. This is, especially as it's the secondary world, so not even everything is like in our world. This is very much in the world of historical. There is a Dybbuk, and we do see some visions of Alters when the Dybbuk takes over Alter, but it is heavily historical, and the author really researched, and you can tell. And it was great, and I loved it. Then the last book I read in August was another reread, and that is The Frog Princess by E.D. Baker. I read this in 6th grade when I was 11 years old at my teacher's house, and then unfortunately she had a terrible divorce, and I did not get to continue to read the series. Now, the fortunate thing is that she got a terrible divorce. Yes, that is the much more unfortunate thing, but it's also unfortunate that I didn't get to continue to read the series. And then I found this in a bookstop. I was like, oh my god, I need to reread the series, even though I only read the first book. I remember really, really loving this in 6th grade, and yeah, I can see why I loved this in 6th grade. As an adult, it was just like, it was nice, it was fun. It was a fun time, but I wasn't like amazed, you know? Okay, so those are all the books I read in August, so let's go over my series. So, I started 6 series. So I started The Promise by Jean Luen Yang. I started Charlie Hernandez, which I DNF'd. I restarted The Cricket in Times Square. I started the Turning Darkness into Light, which it's barely a series. It's a duology, and the second book is a short story. I restarted Aru Shah and the Padava Quartet, which is the Aru Shah series, and I restarted the Frog Princess series. Then I continued 4 series. I read the Kitty Kazoo book. I read 2 Shopaholic books. I read The Promise Part 2, and I read Shazam number 6. Now, about the Shopaholic books, Christmas Shopaholic is the last book, but I still have a short story I haven't read, so I'm not counting it as finished until I read that. But I did finish 2. I read The Promise Part 3, and I also read Night Owl, which, even though it's the first in the duology, is the second book that I read in the duology. So that's everything I read in August. Thank you for watching.